Under Pete Hegseth's leadership at the Pentagon, evangelical Christian nationalism has gained unprecedented visibility inside the U.S. military. The nation's Secretary of Defense has hosted Christian prayer services inside the Pentagon and attends weekly White House Bible studies. He's openly framed geopolitical conflict through the lens of Christian civilization. Tattooed across his chest is the Jerusalem cross. It's a symbol that was the coat of arms of the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem after the year 1099, and it's long associated with the idea of Christian warriors reclaiming the Holy Land.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. A major report has just been released detailing the extent to which Christian nationalist ideology has permeated American society. I spoke with one of the lead researchers behind that report shortly before America launched its attack on Iran. We've been holding that interview to cover breaking news, but given the almost messianic fervor with which Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has described the campaign against Iran, I think it's a good time to talk about the scourge of Christian nationalism more broadly. It has long been a consistent but seemingly fringe feature of the American political right, but it now seems to be infecting the highest levels of the Pentagon. Here was Pete Hegseth at the National Prayer Breakfast last month.
America was founded as a Christian nation. It remains a Christian nation in our DNA if we can keep it. And as public officials, we have a sacred duty 250 years on to glorify Him. We talk a lot about peace through strength. At the War Department, we see ourselves as the Strength Department. But we also need to remember that we derive our strength through faith and through truth and through the Word of God.
My guest today is Dr. Robert Jones, founder and president of the Public Religion Research Institute, whose landmark research on Christian nationalism is sounding alarms about the movement's growing hold on American democracy. I can't think of a more important time to have this conversation than when America is engaged in what some in the administration consider to be a holy war in the Middle East. Here's our conversation. Robbie, thanks so much for joining us. I, at various points reading this report, had to do a double take, given some of the findings and just how embedded Christian nationalism is in not just our political culture, but our culture writ large. And I guess I have to start by asking or by challenging my own assumptions about Christian nationalism as a fringe movement. According to your findings, it is in no way the kind of fringe movement that we sometimes talk about as being outside of the mainstream of politics. It is fully embedded in our culture.
Well, I think that's right. And, you know, when you have this term Christian nationalism, which is a term that sociologists have developed to talk about this movement in its current incarnation, but it's actually quite old in American history. So if we kind of go back, right, this is the same animating movement that we had, for example, with the idea of manifest destiny, right, with Christianity and civilization that was marching across the continent, right? And it was the thing that motivated the genocide of Native Americans. It was the thing that motivated the enslavement of Africans. But it was all about this idea that this little plot of land in North America was intended by God to be a kind of promised land for European Christians. And so it has a very old history, even though this term that we have for it, its current manifestation is quite new. But we find, in the report, just to give you a quick top line, that it's a little more than 3 in 10 Americans that share this worldview, that are either full-on adherents, that no matter what question we throw at them to measure this, yep, I completely agree that U.S. was intended, to be a Christian nation. Laws should be based on the Bible, like those kinds of questions. And another 2 in 10 are sympathetic to that worldview. So it's about 3 in 10 Americans who are either we classify as either Christian nationalism adherents or sympathizers.
I think definitions matter a great deal here.
Yep.
Can you restate what that worldview is? Because it baffles me, for example, that 13% of non-Christians, according to the report, consider themselves either adherents or sympathizers of Christian nationalism. What are they adhering to? What are they sympathizing with specifically?
Well, so obviously this is a very complex topic. And so one of the things that social scientists do when we're trying to measure more complex things like racial animus or Christian nationalism is we rely not just on one question, but on multiple questions. So we kind of triangulate using a bunch of questions. And that way we're sure that we're not just cherry picking one question that somebody reacted to in a very particular way. So in this case, we're building on about a decade of social science research, and we're using 5 different questions. And so respondents actually have to answer quite consistently across all 5 measures before they're classified as Christian nationalists. So if you just answered one way on one question, but another on others, you would not get classified. So let me give you the questions that we use in this. So we use a scale. It's a five question scale. Here are the questions that are part of the definition. These are all agree, disagree questions. So 1, God has called Christians to exercise dominion over all areas of American society. 2, the U.S. government should declare America a Christian nation. 3, being Christian is an important part of being truly American. 4, if the U.S. moves away from our Christian foundations, we will not have a country anymore. And 5, U.S. laws should be based on Christian values. So again, you have to, in order to be classified, for example, as a Christian nationalism adherent, the kind of top category, you have to essentially completely agree with all 5 of those questions. And to be a rejecter, you have to completely disagree with all 5 of those questions. And we also think it's helpful that we have this scale. We have actually 4 categories for kind of strength of adherence, but we do find this kind of break that.
Well, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I pause right there? Because I mean, for those hearing this for the first time, that is going to send shivers down the spine. Those 5 questions are antithetical to what many people see as the pluralistic vision of not just the founders, but the promises since then, the separation of church and state. And I mean, I'll get at the larger question with the specific one. How in the world do 13% of non-Christians answer enough of those questions to be considered sympathizers or adherents? And the larger question, of course, is how did we get here? Yeah.
Well, to take the first one, so when we have people who are considered non-religious, unaffiliated, they are the people who answer. When we ask them, what is your religion? They say either I'm atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular. So that's the group that is in that group. But many of them, are kind of culturally sympathetic to this worldview. They grew up Christian and then left the church officially.
That's what I want to drill deep on. The cultural affectation of Christianity, the non-church going cultural Christians who might have the cross on the back of their pickup truck next to a "Don't Tread on Me" sticker, who don't understand the precepts or the teachings, but they wear Christianity as sort of as an FU to wokeism, right?
No, I think that's right. There's certainly that component to it as well. One interesting finding that we found here is that, and this goes to the "how do we get here" question, is that, when we measured, for example, these attitudes against church attendance or frequency of reading the Bible, we actually found a positive correlation, right? So particularly among white Americans, the more likely you are to go to church, the more likely you are to hold Christian nationalist values, the more likely you were to read the Bible, the more likely you were to hold these views. So it has become not just embedded in the culture, but at least in some churches, embedded actually in the churches themselves. So they are vectors of this worldview, coming into the culture.
It's Ken with a quick break to tell you about my Substack page, where you'll find bonus episodes and other exclusive content. And subscribing is a way to support this show directly without us having to rely on advertisers. For those of you who have signed up, thank you so much. It is growing harder and harder to rely on traditional media. Just look at what has happened over at CBS. So independent news is going to have to make up the gap. And if you believe in what we're trying to do here in the interviews and the commentary that this show brings you, please consider pitching in. It's free to sign up, and that itself is helpful because popular shows get recommended even more people. And if you're able to afford a paid subscription, they start at $8 a month. Every dollar goes back into what we're doing. Thanks for helping out. We haven't even mentioned Trump.
Yeah.
And the effect that the rise of MAGA and Trumpism has had on, I guess, expressions of Christian nationalism. I mean, you make a very compelling argument that it has always been there. It's part of America's history. But the permission structure now to openly state that, that we are a Christian nation and that if you disagree, go back to your own country, as Trump has said to representatives in the U.S. Congress. What has the effect been of the rise of Trump on this strain of Christian nationalism in our culture and politics?
Yeah, well, I think the word you use, permission structure, is dead on. That essentially leadership really does matter on these issues. Like, for example, we can go back and look at Republican attitudes on immigration and just see this steady erosion, and it just starts falling off a cliff once Trump becomes the leader of the Republican Party. Like, you and I are old enough to remember there was actually a bipartisan effort at immigration reform, right? That George W. Bush was actually behind. And that is long gone, right? This particular version of Christian nationalism is wrapped up with whiteness and white supremacy. I should just be very clear about that. And that's why the anti-immigrant piece fits hand in glove with this worldview, right? So it's not just we think that Christian values should sort of, in some diffuse way, influence the state, but it really is about this kind of claim. It's about territory. That's why you're seeing words like heritage, and heritage Americans, like J.D. Vance has used this term, heritage Americans. And it's all about being white, being Christian. Those are the people who are truly American. Everybody else, right, is here in some second class status. But to Trump, it is really remarkable. We have measured this in a number of ways. The correlation between adherence to Christian nationalism and sort of having positive views of Trump, positive views of MAGA is absolutely linear. We have a chart in this report that if you were doing an intro to statistics class and you were looking for an example of a positive linear relationship, this chart would be a great one to stick in your textbook and say, this is what a positive linear relationship looks like. And it goes all the way down to the state level. I should say that in this report, we were able to measure, because we interviewed over 22,000 Americans. So we were able to go all the way down to the state level. And in every state, the more the residents of that state support Christian nationalism, the more they supported Trump. We could actually sort the vote by just looking at support for Christian nationalism. And it's a pretty high predictor.
That's incredible. But I think some skeptics of the alarm being sounded by this report would say, well, Christian nationalism, as you said, has always been with us. It's part of our DNA. What makes this current strain so virulent? Is it really as dangerous as we are suggesting it is?
Well, I'd say we have a body count. The first thing I would say. I mean, we have families putting their loved ones in the ground as a result of this worldview. I mean, I think we've just seen it. It's unleashing all kinds of, the kind of violent insurgent we see by ICE, for example, doesn't get off the ground without this version saying immigrants are an existential threat to white Christian people and to a white Christian nation. And so we have to unleash this kind of violence in the country. And I think that's the thing, is it does set up this worldview that these lands, again, were intended by God to be used for white Christian people. And if we feel that slipping away, all means are on the table for protecting that and restoring what they see as sort of their God-given right and God-given place at the top of the kind of hierarchy of being in this country.
That was a condensed version of my conversation with Robbie Jones. For the full interview, check out my Substack page. The link is below. Thanks.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.